Are you ready to spend your weekend with Friedkin?
Woo, Daddy. How y'all doing, man? It's Uncle Rad here with you tonight. Yeah. So, it's going to be really hard to pull that off for the entire time that I do these reviews. So, I'm just going to keep it real laid back and smooth like, bodacious, if you will, and radical. So, on this edition of Weekend at Freakins, old Uncle Rad is bringing to you two classics in the crime drama exploitation style cinema, and that is The French Connection 1 and 2. I've got a lot of thoughts about both of these films. It's going to be really hard, like I said, to pull off talking about two of the grittiest films of all time, while simultaneously dressed like somebody that plays Minecraft all the time. But I'm gonna give it a try. So we'll see what happens. But I don't have a co-host. I do not have a co-host for this because I don't know. I don't know what the deal was. I guess not enough people have seen The French Connection 2, or maybe there's just not enough people that have enough balls to get on here and co-host a show. But come on, man. Like, these are two of the 70s classics. Maybe not so much The French Connection 2, but we'll talk about that in pretty great detail as well. I'm not sure if I would call The French Connection 2 a classic. I'm not really sure what the deal is with John Frankenheimer, but we'll find out. So let's see who we got in here first. Stuntman Mark is in here as usual. Good to see you, man. X-Ray Punch. Blair Hathaway. Yes. I am the dude love for. I'm the Uncle Rad of radness. All the little radishes out there. I just want you to know, radishes, that I'm keeping it cool and radical for you all. It's bodacious and tubular and circular. Anyway, Phantasmat. It's good to see you in here. I thought you'd be on this show for some reason. I thought that you would be the co-host, but it did not work out in those ways. Texas HXCX 1965 Yo-Yo Boss. There's a Facebook user in here. How you doing, man? I don't know who you are, but Movie Junkie John is in here. All right, so let's get started, I guess. So I kind of messed up the order of doing these, in and of the fact that this should have been probably the first one that I did, because this was really the start of Friedkin's career, and for some reason I just completely skipped over it and went on and did something else. But I mean, we're here now, so we might as well just enjoy the ride, Daddy-O, if you will. So what happened with The French Connection? Oh God, Curly Jaws is alive. Man, that's the best news I've heard in a while. Curly, I'm glad that whatever was going on didn't take you out. I'm sure it was just life. Just life getting you excited. Uh, Dale Gribble says I look like a Backstreet Boy. Man, this is the rad look that the kids are doing these days. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. This is how everybody's hanging. Anyway, so this is the film that started Friedkin's career. Prior to this, Friedkin had some of his comments are amazing. Prior to this, Friedkin had been a documentary filmmaker, and he had made actually a movie. Oh God, I wish I could remember the name of it. I should have more like research, but he made a movie about an inmate on death row, and that movie ended up saving the guy's life because it was a documentary, and I guess the warden had saw it, and maybe then the governor had saw it, and they granted the guy clemency, and they didn't end up killing him. And he became fairly well known for making that film, and due to that, he was here to stay, so to speak. So he was a pretty hot commodity at that point in time. He'd made several documentary films, none probably as big as that. And there was a book floating around at the time, which, by the way, Friedkin says he's never read this book. I find that incredibly hard to believe, but uh, yeah, the book was called The Same Thing, The French Connection. It was written by Robin Moore in 1969, and it details two New York police detectives. Um, and one of them is a guy by the name of Eddie Egan, who would become the inspiration for Gene Hackman's character, Popeye Doyle, in this film. And the other one was Sonny Grosso, who would become the inspiration for Buddy Russo, which is Roy Scheider's character in this film. So they're real life guys, and this was a real case, and it was, pretty much. I've heard Friedkin say that about 90% of this movie is exactly like what happened. It's about a heroin smuggling ring. Um, and to kind of get into the plot of the book and the film and everything else, um, I just start right off. But the pre-production and how Friedkin came to direct this, I guess, was pretty basic, pretty simple. Like he was offered, this book, and he said he never read it, and he was, the 20th Century Fox was basically like your style of filmmaking, your documentary background would be perfect for this type of movie. So, and he kind of bought into it, and he had his own ideas for what he wanted to do with the film, as he did for like most all the films that he directed, especially in the 70s and early 80s. So, I mean, to just start off, you got, and I'll come back to these comments because these comments are amazing. I just want to give like a basic outline of the plot real quick. To start off, though, you got, uh, this is a great story too. You got a police detective in France who's following this drug smuggler in his operation. His name is Charnier or Charnier or however the French pronounce it. And he's following him around in France, and that's how the movie starts off. Then a hitman comes by, Pierre Nicoli, and he ends up killing this guy and kind of stepping over his body and then going out. And then you fast forward to New York as you find out that Charnier plans to smuggle about $30 million worth of heroin into the U.S. And the way that he is going to go about doing this is he's got a buddy who is kind of like a television star, and he's going to, have him go over and say that he's on some sort of a vacation or something like that, and take this car over. He's going to smuggle all this heroin in this car, and he doesn't think anybody will suspect this guy because he's a pretty big star in France, so to speak. So you get to all that. You fast forward to New York, where you see the lead character Gene Hackman and his partner Roy Scheider, which is we'll just from now on call him Popeye and Russo, who are, they're. This is what is great about this movie to me. I don't think that this dynamic really existed in this form up until this movie. The partners who are kind of like sleazy cop, you know, hanging out in bars, hanging out in strip clubs, roughing people up, and who have their own kind of like language between one another. Like that really didn't. That kind of movie really didn't exist in the sense of this until and it's been copied like I couldn't even tell you how many times now. But prior to this, it really didn't exist. And they really play well off of each other too. I've never thought that, and I've talked about this before. I've never thought that Roy Scheider was that great of a leading man, but as a co-star, I mean, he plays those kind of character roles perfectly. I don't know why he didn't, mostly stay in that lane, when he would go on to do, you know, Jaws and Sorcerer and all that jazz, and you know, playing these bigger roles. But when he's just kind of like the side character, it seems like he's a lot more interesting than he was in this movie too. So you're kind of just the first part of the movie is just establishing who these cops are and their characters, and you know they've got all these connections, and like there's one scene in particular where they are roughing up this bar, and this guy runs in, and he's like they're Lord, they're roughing up this bar, and the guy runs in, and they rough him up, and then they kind of like Popeye kind of takes him into a back room, and you come to find out like he's an informant, but he's just acting like that he's being really really hard on him. So he's telling him information about like everybody that he knows in the drug trade around that place, and that's just kind of how the movie was. And Friedkin, one of the great things about Friedkin is he was completely hands on with this movie, meaning that he immersed himself with those two cops and went around with them to drug busts, narcotics busts, all these different things. He even like arrested a couple of people himself during the course of like the making of and getting to make this movie. And he was just a stickler for reality. So he wanted Hackman to talk like he heard these guys talk. He wanted him to act like he heard him act, or like he saw him act. Like he wanted everything to be legit. And it was. I mean, I think that's the biggest part about what the selling point to this movie is that there is no point in this movie where you feel like any of it's fake. Like you 100% believe that Gene Hackman is this guy and Roy Scheider is this guy, and like this stuff is really going on. Like none of it seems like acting. But the funny part about it, of the casting process of this movie though, because Hackman, okay, so Friedkin gets Hackman because Hackman really is interested in making the movie, and you know he's trying to make like a breakout role. But the French guy that would play the main heel in this film is cast because Friedkin sees this movie that he really loves. It's called Belle de Jour, which is a French film, and I've never seen it, if we're being honest. But he's like, the guy that's in that movie tells his casting director, I want the guy that was in that movie that, had the beard or whatever. And back then there's no IMDb, so they're just going by whatever kind of like he tells them. So they invite this guy to the United States to audition for this film, and he gets there, and this is Fernando Rey. He gets there, and Friedkin's like, that's not the guy. It's not like the same guy. He wasn't ever even in that movie. So he calls up the producers. He's like, we got to get the hell rid of this guy because this is not the same guy that I really loved in this movie. I don't want this guy in this film. And they're like, well, I mean, he's here. Just kind of like try him out. So that's how Fernando Rey, got into this movie to play the lead heel, the lead villain, and does a great job. Like I can't really imagine anybody else in this film. And Um, there's just some great performances in this film. So people always talk about the car chase in this film, and the car chase in this film, which I'll get into, is amazing. But the whole movie is great, really. It's a little bit dated now. Like, I mean, some of the stuff comes across as a little bit too gritty and grindhouse now. The way films look. I think that it's just jarring to see what that style film looked like once you compare it to like all these overproduced Marvel and DC movies and shit like that now. And then you go back and you look at a movie like this that looks like it was made 16 millimeter, that, was made on the streets of New York where there's no, extras per se. Like there's just people walking around and they're looking at the camera. Like, I mean, that's the way that he did these movies. He, would just immerse himself in the life of New York and just start filming. So, there's some amazing subway scenes that are amazing because it's just people that were on the subway. Now, he told them, what was going on and that there was a film being made. It was just people that happened to be on there, and like the people walking, across the streets and things. They're just people that happened to be there. And so that's what adds to this movie. That's what makes this movie. And you'll never see movies like this anymore because nobody will ever do that anymore. And, they just won't. Like, it's so, hard to make an independent film. And you're not going to make an independent film outside of, like, where you don't have permits and things like that anymore. Like, that would never happen. And there's this freaking Screen Actors Guild and the Screenwriters Guild and it's just none of this is possible anymore. So, but keep that in mind though, that the main thing about this film to me is the grittiness of it, the realism of it, the way that it looks, the fact that you know it's as if you just got dropped into New York around this time and you were with these cops, which is the documentary style that they were looking for. But I don't think that even the producers of this film, I don't think would recognize that it would change the entire crime genre from this point forward. Because if you go back in the '60s and look at like crime films that were made in the '60s, okay, you know even the best ones that you can think of, even the best detective kind of dramas that you can think of from the '60s were shot like Hollywood films. And this was not shot like that at all. So, and this is a great point too. And X Ray says, the dialogue in the French Connection is very un PC too, but that's how racist cops talk back then. Yeah, there's a lot of what you would call street talk, I guess, back at that time. And that's because that's what, Friedkin saw these guys doing. Everything in this was something that he had seen real cops do. And it's just amazing to kind of get like a glimpse of that time period, that era, the '70s at that time when, it was so raw and kind of, unfiltered. Yeah, yeah. It's like smoking a Camel cigarette. It's what watching the French Connection is like. Um, but anyway, back to the overall plot of the film. So basically, they finally figure out that, meaning that Popeye and Russo finally figure out through their informants and people on the street that, and their wiretapping people as well, that this, there's something going on. They're not exactly sure what with this guy, and they're trying to figure out what his plot is, like what he's trying to do. And so that Popeye trails him, and probably like one of the best scenes that's not the car chase scene is the subway scene where Popeye is trailing the Charnier guy, and through like Grand Central Station, And they're kind of like, it's kind of like a cat and mouse thing. So at some point he realizes that he's being followed. He realizes the cops are kind of onto him. So he steps into the subway and he sees if, Gene Hackman's going to step into the subway with him. And when he does, he's like, all right, yeah, I know what's going on. So he puts his umbrella in the door of the train right before it closes and kind of jumps out and then jumps back on. And, he kind of just rides off while Hackman is just kind of standing there, you know, and watching the subway go by, which is where that sets up the car chase scene. Because now Hackman's pissed, which is a big defining part of Popeye Doyle's character in this, is that he's angry all the time. He is basically like the template for every like grizzled, angry police detective that you would see in films in the 80s. Like, so for every Martin Riggs and, John McClane, that's all coming from this character. This is like the template for that. So he runs down, beneath where the subway is, and he commandeers like a car from somebody. And this is the part that blows my mind. Now I still have questions about this whole sequence too, and I'm sure that like somewhere somebody's explained it, but I just haven't heard it. But this is the part that blows my mind. Okay, so he commandeers this vehicle, and pretty much everybody knows that's seen this film. They have no permits for this car chase scene. They don't clear the streets. They don't do anything that you would normally do in a film. So in other words, he gets in this car, you see Hackman get in, and then it cuts to like an inside out view of, what you're seeing through the windshield, which was Friedkin in the car, and then one of the stunt coordinators driving, I can't remember which one it was. And they're really driving through Brooklyn traffic, just driving through it. Bill Hickman is the guy's name. Sorry, yeah, that's the court. They are driving like for real. So there's a bunch, and this is the part that I was curious about. So if all this is real, he crashes this car into people like in 3 different times that I counted. Like he crashes like in one scene into another car, and then into a truck, and then back into a truck. So did they just like drive off? Did they stop and cut and they'd be like, hey, is everybody all right? I would like to know that's part of this that I would like to know that I could not find any information on. Like, so they apparently drove through all this traffic, risk all these people's lives, actually wrecked the car several different times that I don't think was a stunt, and amazingly nobody dies in this movie. Nobody was injured or anything. Yeah, and so there is a scene. There's a scene at the tail end of the chase where there's like a woman with a baby carrier that's like walking out, and that's an actual like cut filmed scene. So like you can't try to like miss running over a baby. So that's all planned out and shot. So yeah, Matt, like this is an interesting question too. So he says he thinks maybe the car crashes were planted. I hope so, because that looks like that would be. I don't know. That would be really, really like rough if they actually just crashed into people, and I would love to know like how that did. So maybe if it was yeah, and some people are saying that it wasn't planned. So I'm not entirely sure. If anybody knows the answer to that question though, if you can find it somewhere, I couldn't find it. Like, were the crashes in the film like planned? Were they unplanned? I know that the driving part, like the part that you see with him weaving in and out of traffic, is not planned. That's just exactly like what you see But I'm curious about all the other stuff, if that was actually planned or not. Anyway, point being is that he's chasing him underneath this subway, and and that's probably like one of the greatest car chases of all time. It goes on for, I didn't count, but it feels like 10-15 minutes. So I mean, it's really, really long and kind of, at points in it, the guy hijacks the subway train, so they don't really stop where they're supposed to stop. They just keep going, and uh, yeah, it's just it's an incredibly long sequence. I can actually see why that it's called one of the best car chases of all time. People say Bullet. They say this film. A lot of people think To Live and Die in L.A. has a great. I agree with that too, and that's in like one of the other videos to talk about that. This is a great car chase scene because it's a real car chase, and it's the same reason that Sorcerer is great for the bridge scene and the tree scene, because that stuff was really filmed in camera with no effects, and you can tell the difference between when something is cut to pieces and staged versus when something is really made, and it's just a whole other thing. Like when you see the real thing, like people driving through traffic and running into stuff, and like it puts all this other like shit that with their movies like Drive and stuff like that, where the car chases and things like that are just, it's ridiculous. Like you can definitely tell the difference. So that being said, there's another great scene in this movie too that not a lot of people talk about. So there's a scene where that kind of, I should have prefaced all this by talking about this scene. So the French guy realizes who Gene Hackman is, that he's a cop, and he makes him. So he sends like this guy who's the assassin to kill him, and Gene Hackman's like walking home, and he kind of intersects. I don't know what the deal was with Friedkin in this movie and like women with baby carriages, but he intersects with this woman with a baby carriage right at the moment they cross paths, like in front of one another. Right at the moment that the guy's up on a roof with a sniper rifle and he shoots to try to kill Hackman, and the woman gets hit, and then like he dives beside this tree and kind of takes cover. And there's a great scene of him like climbing up this apartment complex to try. Very reminiscent. I don't know which one came first. Very reminiscent of like Dirty Harry, where he's climbing up to get to the top to find the. God, what the hell was that guy's name in that movie? The Scorpion, the Vertigo, the Serpico, the fuck was the guy's name? The killer. Anyway, it's very much like that. And he gets to the top, and the sniper rifle's there, nobody's there, and then he looks down, and he's kind of like running away from him. And so then after all that crap and this big chase that pursuing him and all this, comes down out of the subway, and there's another great scene. It's like one great scene after another in this movie. He sees him. He finally catches up to him. He sees him, and he's walking, towards the subway steps, and Hackman's at the bottom of the subway platform, and he screams at him to stop. And the guy turns around to run, and Hackman shoots him in the back, and he just falls down the steps, which is also a great. It gets like a stunt, he falls all the way down the steps. Really, like falls all the way down the steps, like right in front of him in one shot, and. A lot of people talked about that scene because, the cops that were supervising this film were like, well, that would be murder. Like, no, you can't shoot somebody in the back when they're like running away. And Friedkin was like, no, this is what this guy would do. Like, this is what this character would do. Like, he's so obsessed with, like, this guy trying to kill him and trying to get revenge that he would just shoot him in the back. He would just shoot him, period, no matter what, just to, prove a point. So, the end of the movie, it kind of, I'm really torn about the end of this movie, if I'm being honest with you. So, essentially, there's another amazing scene that you can just tell was the prototype for another dozen Hollywood scenes, where they finally realize that he's Hackman's character kind of stays watch with this vehicle that he knows that these people they're up to no good somehow or another with this car, and he begins to realize that they're probably smuggling drugs in this car. So he kind of stands watch, to see who comes and goes around where this car's at, and finally ends up, he gets the car, he takes it into a chop shop, or the police chop shop, I guess, and they like tear it to pieces. And this is a great scene where they tear it to pieces, and there's a scene, they don't find anything at first, and there's a scene where like this big hydraulic lift like takes the car all the way up to the top after hours of them going through it, and like through the lift you can see Gene Hackman's kind of just like, he's just sitting there with his head down like, oh my god, like I'm not going to find anything and this guy's going to get away. Such a great shot in that movie too. Eventually he figures out that they're hiding the heroin in the rails, like on the side of your car, where where you step out, like you can pop up those rails, and they've got all the heroin like stuffed in there. And so you don't know. The French guy comes back and he picks up his car, and you don't necessarily know like what they've done. Like I was thinking, like did the cops take the heroin out of the car before they gave it back to him? Because they know, but they let the French guy come and like take the car. Did they take the heroin out? Did they leave it in? Like, are they gonna, like what's gonna happen? So it turns out they left the heroin in the car. So the French guy drives it out to where he's gonna meet up with I guess it's the mafia, to distribute the heroin, and takes the heroin out, and they're like, oh, great job or whatever, and he's driving back, and at the end of the bridge, the cops are all waiting for him, and then there's this great scene, like a shootout scene where Scheider's shooting people and cops are getting shot, and they're in this warehouse like where they made the drug bust, and it's just all that kind of war. And then the main end of the film, this is the part that I'm kind of torn about. The main end of the film is their boss. Hackman's going in through this warehouse, in and out of rooms, like because he thinks he sees this guy. He thinks he sees the Frenchman, and he's like determined to catch this guy. And so their boss, who's like the police sergeant or whatever, comes down and he accidentally shoots and kills him. And Scheider's like there with him, and he's like, hey, I mean, you killed him. Like, what are we going to do? And basically Hackman's character is like, I know he's in here. Like, I'm going to find him. He walks off, walks down a hallway. You hear like one single gunshot, and then the movie ends. So, well, it kind of ends there. Like, another part of the movie I wasn't exactly thrilled about was like they had all these different like cue cards, or not cue cards, but like they showed the people, and then they had like what happened to them after the film, and it's just like such and such person got 5 years in jail, such and such person got released, such and such. So when it gets to the French guy, it's basically like he was not seen again, and he's assumed to be living in France. So that part confused me though, because okay, there's one shot, and the movie ends. So if the Frenchman got away, how could that be? Because either it was Hackman shot the French guy, or the French guy shot Hackman. And if the French guy shot Hackman, I don't think he would like. Would he get away? I guess, and then Hackman would be dead. Is that the thought? Because he definitely like Hackman definitely didn't shoot him. Because at the end they say he's living somewhere in France. So that part was confusing to me. But it's exactly the type of ending that I want in a freaking movie, because it does exactly what like all those other movies did, like Sorcerer and To Live and Die in L.A., which is like it leaves you with this feeling that you fill in the blanks of like whatever you think happened, and it does not tell you what happened. It doesn't give you a kind of like hoorah ending where the cops get their man and like everything is great. And I think that was a big part of like why he wanted to do it this way too, was because in reality a lot of these guys that get picked up for these narcotic violations, especially then and even now, like they just got off without any real jail time or anything like that. And that's kind of what it looked like he was just saying at the end of the movie. He's like, okay, so these really horrible guys that did all this, well they he got parole, he got like 30 days, etc., etc. And that's kind of where the movie ends up. But I don't know. What are your all's thoughts on the ending? Because I'm going to scroll through some of these comments here in a second, but I just want to know like what your guys' thoughts on the ending. All right. So Ken says that Friedkin has retired cops with him during the chase in case they got in trouble. That was a good idea. And Douglas says for a movie about smack dealers, you don't see much smack in it. That's true. Like you barely see any. I think the only time that you see anything is when like there's a scene when they're testing it before they buy it, and like that they guy takes it out and he pours some sort of liquid on it or something, and like that's the only time you see anything. Jake says that Freakin' was one step away from a big moral incident during that sequence. Same with Sorcerer. I totally believe that. Like, I mean, it looks like that for sure during that. Let's see. Yeah, I've seen this too. It says Freakin' says that he regrets a lot of the irresponsible shit he did in the 70s. Yeah, I've seen him say, in interviews, he was like, I would never do this stuff now. Like, I would never, like, put people's lives in jeopardy and, like, do all these stunts without, like, he's like, that's just would not happen. He's like, but it did happen. And, it is what it is. So, let's see. Yeah, Stuntman Mark. Yeah, he didn't get any permits for the chases, for the chase scenes. This is truth. X-Ray Punch. Popeye Doyle is the prototypical 70s anti-hero. He's not a good person. He does questionable shit, and he even murders another cop in cold blood. I like how they didn't retcon that shit at all in French Connection 2. Yeah, which we'll get into soon. French Connection 2 is a weird movie. Like, we'll get into it, but the middle of that movie, I was just not expecting that. And James Hester says the movie doesn't really end. That's true. Like, it doesn't. It just kind of, it's on like a cliffhanger. Yeah, this is a good point, Gore Grinder. Says he says, I know this has nothing to do with what you're talking about, but just wanted to say rest in peace to Clue Goular. Definitely. I just heard about that like before I got on here to do this stream, that he passed away. So yeah, the guy was a great guy. One of the like Leslie Nielsen types of older actors that kind of got into comedy and horror and stuff like that. And he was great in Return of the Living Dead and Feast, and a lot of really odd choices for movies. Jake says the ending of the movie where he shoots the cop was based on something that the real Popeye Doyle said to Friedkin about wanting to kill a cop who gave him a hard time. Yeah. And Jake also says he's just firing shots into the dark. He didn't hit anything. Uh, yeah. X-Ray Punch says the drugs are just the MacGuffin. It's all about how the cops and the bad guys aren't that much different from one another. Yeah, I mean, Friedkin does this theme throughout his entire career, where he's like, there's good and bad in everybody, and like there's no good guys and there's no bad guys. There's just people that have both those tendencies, and they do it. You know, cops are just as bad in this movie in some ways as the criminals. I 100% believe this too. I hadn't heard this, but Freak had said in the scene where they test the heroin, it was really heroin. I somehow believe that Freakin probably got um, heroin, probably from the cops that he was working with at the time, just to do that scene to make it real. So okay, here's some. But I don't know. While I'm looking this up, I'm going to give you some basic info about this movie, and then I'm going to kind of summarize this one, and we'll move on to part two. But any comments that you want to make, the stuff that I didn't talk about, or like stuff that you would want to say about the film, go ahead. I'm going to be scrolling through some just basic stuff here. So, The French Connection, made in 1971, had a budget of $1.8 million, and it made $75 million worldwide. Um, Widely considered to be one of the greatest films of all time. It won 5 Academy Awards, and it won Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, Best Film Editing, and Best Screenplay. It was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Scheider, which that's a fucking shame. Poor old Roy Scheider. Like, I don't imagine he won for Jaws. Um, so, yeah. Well, Matt, buddy, as far as I can tell, all the shit you're talking about has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So that's kind of why I skipped it. I'm sorry. Um, so yeah, I don't think Scheider won. Maybe he won for All That Jazz. It seems like he was nominated. He's been nominated several different times, but I'm not positive that he ever won anything. Da, 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 da. Oh, there's another story in this too, where Freakin basically becomes a a narcotic detective in the process of making this movie. So this guy, especially Sonny Grosso, who was one of the main inspirations in the film, and who was one of the main, I guess you'd call him like technical advisors in the film. He takes Freaking out on all these busts, and he lets him arrest these people, and he teaches him how to be a narcotics cop to the point where he's actually riding around in cars and like starts to portray as being like a cop. And I thought that would never again like probably happen today, where I mean they would probably talk to people, but they wouldn't let them be. They would not let them be actual cops and shit anymore. So as you can imagine, though, like this film was a huge success, launched pretty much everybody in its career, launched Freakin's career, and I think that the most success he ever had would be in the next 5-10 years. Um, it was released on September 2001. That's kind of sad. on VHS and DVD, with both formats being released in box sets. And both the film and its sequel, French Connection 2, for a 2009 reissue on Blu ray. That's another thing, too. There is a whole controversy about that. That fucking dog's killing me. There's a whole controversy that Friedkin was trying to make the Blu ray release look like a VHS tape and ended up like really fucking up the color and the color timing in the movie. And to the point where there's a Blu ray, and I don't know which one it is. I don't know if it's just the one that I used the image from, or there's a couple of those, a couple of Blu-rays that people say just to absolutely avoid. It's kind of like the Halloween kind of syndrome where it messed up the color timing so bad that it's almost unwatchable. But that was him just fucking around with the film, basically trying to make it like a grittier kind of vibe. And that's kind of what happens, I think, too, when you try to make a processed grindhouse looking film, like you run it through all those filters and stuff to try to make it look older, and it just comes across looking fucking weird. But okay, so that's about what I've got on the French Connection. Great movie. Would highly recommend it. I would, I'm be honest, like, I loved Sorcerer, Cruising. Fuck. I might even put To Live and Die in LA. I don't know. That's kind of sacrilege to say that, but I might put that above this one. But there's no denying the fact that this movie influenced every other movie like this that came along. And it's still a great film 50 years later. 50 fucking years later. But The French Connection 2 comes around in 1975. I'll be honest with you, up until I started doing this show, I had no idea that The French Connection 2 even existed. I didn't know there was a sequel to The French Connection. I don't know how they would make a sequel to The French Connection. Until, like, somebody had mentioned it in one of these chats or something. And I was just like, all right, well, I mean, it's not a William Friedkin movie. This is the only film in this entire series that was not directed or had really anything to do with William Friedkin. But I just thought it was an interesting, contrast to put these two films up side by side and take a look at them. It's a very different movie, though. So John Frankenheimer ends up coming in to direct this movie, and I kept thinking that Frankenheimer was the guy that directed The Exorcist 2, but I don't think that he was. I'm trying to remember who the hell did direct The Exorcist 2. So I'm trying to figure that out. It would be amazing if it was him, because that would be two of Friedkin's best known films that this guy came in and did sequels to. So Frankenheimer has got his own pretty illustrious career. No, it wasn't him. So you might know him from like The Manchurian Candidate, Black Sunday, just a ton of shit. He was apparently a big fan of Roy Scheider too. And so, okay, in this one, in The French Connection 2, they've got some real problems like with this movie. At least I do, like starting right off. So The French Connection is known for being, the stereotypical, the quintessential, if you will, New York movie. It looks like New York, to the point of like the realism is outstanding. So The French Connection 2 takes place entirely in France. And there's just something about that is wrong. But, you know, that's kind of what it was. And in this movie, Popeye Doyle, Gene Hackman is back, and he is in France trying to find the same guy that escaped from the original film. And Fernando Reyes in this one as well, playing the same character. And the first half of the film, and they, by the way, they've done this movie 8,000 times too. So it's like this is your fish out of water cop movie where you basically Rush Hour. Like, okay, so this guy is, like the stereotypical New York cop. He's dropped into France, doesn't speak the language. The first half of the movie, or quarter of the movie, I guess, is basically just him, you know, going around to these bars and stuff and like trying to get people to find people that speak English and giving people shit for not speaking English and having run-ins with these French detectives who are like, well, we've read your file and we personally don't like your ways and the way of doing things and you're a cop killer and yada yada yada. And he's like, well, fuck, I don't like you all because you're a bunch of pansies. That's basically like the first quarter of the movie. So what happens though, and this part caught me completely off guard in an awesome way, I guess, because I just didn't see it coming at all. So Fernando Rey eventually sees Hackman, makes out who he is, and he's like, well, fuck it, I'm not going through all this stuff again. So he gets together this squad to like kidnap him. They kidnap him. They take him to this like, I don't know what you would call it, like the equivalent of a French crack house, and they get him addicted to heroin. So the whole goddamn middle of this movie is Gene Hackman being shot up with heroin. There's just something about that that's just, I don't know. And like so they keep coming in, they keep kind of like roughing him up and shooting him up with heroin and trying to break him basically to the point where I don't know why they don't just shoot him in the fucking head and just be done with it, but they just get him addicted to heroin and finally he manages to escape and he ends up on the doorstep of the French police and he's completely addicted to heroin and he's got to like go through the whole withdrawal process. Jesus Christ, man. This is a dark, probably darker than anything else in any of these, like, in the two movies. Because, like, there's a scene where Hackman's laying on this bed and he's just, like, going through the withdrawals and stuff. And this little old woman comes in and she's, like, talking to him. She's like, oh, I had a son who was like you or something that had problems and yada yada yada, and she's kind of like petting on him and stuff. And then you see like the track marks on her arms, and she steals his watch, and you come to find out that she's also like there, and she's a heroin addict, and like it's just this whole place that he's at. There's nobody in it except like junkies, and they're basically just hopeless for him. And just her whole performance in that was kind of freaking creepy too. So, just what I thought might happen in this film kind of does happen, which is people couldn't really take the fact that the original film has such like a odd cliffhanger style ending. So in this one, Hackman withdraws off of the heroin. He hulks up. He's barely alive when he gets dumped off in the police station, but he hulks up. He gets through the withdrawals cold turkey. And, Bartholomew, who is like the French police detective, finally has respect for him and sees that he's willing to go through this hell of going through this withdrawal and getting himself back on the right road. So the whole police department now respects him because of this, and it's a real kind of like Hollywood style, movie. It's like you can 100% tell that Friedkin didn't have anything to do with this movie. Like that, none of this shit would fly, and except maybe for the heroin part. Like he probably addicted him to heroin, but then like he would, he would shoot himself in the head or something and wouldn't get through it. But anyway, so he comes out of it. They get together with the French police and the inspectors, and they rush this boat. And there's this big gun battle, which is probably like the gun battle on the dock is probably the same as like what they were trying to do with the car. It's like one of the big pivotal moments in the film. The big action sequences. And they open up this big like spillway, this big dam and everything, and all the henchmen and stuff are surrounding the place, and so basically it culminates with Doyle ends up taking the guy out, the French guy out. So, and I knew that was coming because he shoots him and kills him. Um, I I knew that was coming, but I kind of like wished that it wouldn't, because that was kind of like one of the defining moments of the French Connection. Really was like, and I'm not saying that I think that might be the weakest part of the film, but it's also like one of the more controversial parts of the film, because they just didn't do that, like Hollywood films, and they just didn't, or big films at that time. You didn't just leave a cliffhanger like that and not know what's going on. And then Frankenheimer comes in and he fucking shoots him dead, and it's like, all right, that's what people wanted, I guess. But it just felt shallow and weak as compared to the first film, really. But I don't know, for the people that have seen, I don't think that there's going to be many people that have seen the French Connection too. Because, like I said, it's no. When's the last time you ever heard anybody like just reference the French Connection 2? Like, I had no idea. Like I said, it was even a movie. But anybody that has seen it, give me an idea of like what your thoughts are about it. Really. Hollywood Jake Time Walker, thank you very much. I am very rad. I'm very radical, and I'm very cylindrical. Yeah. See, Alex says the real French Connection case is significant because it was one of the first transnational drug smuggling rings uncovered in the U.S. Interesting how far criminality has come since then. Sitka84 says the first movie is great. The second one, I don't know. I don't know either. Have you seen the second one, Sitka? Because I'm not sure. It's one of those movies where it's so odd. Like, I know, there's not, after that first film, there's not a lot of places, I guess, that you could take that character and make it, like, unless you're free, can make that work. But it just seemed like some very odd choices. Hackman would have been a good Sheriff Brody. I never thought about it, but that's actually probably true. X-Ray Punch says, the end of the French Connection 2 feels almost like a weird dream where you're trying to reach your goal, but it keeps getting further and further away from your grasp. That's a good explanation of it. Yeah, this movie I'd love to see. I wish I would have gotten to see it in order to review it. Rampage, with Michael Biehn, who's in it. 1987 from Friedkin is also interesting, based on the story of serial killer Richard Chase. I will eventually track this movie down because I want to see it. It's probably like one of his least known movies, and he's had a lot of like least known movies. But this one is like almost impossible to find. I'm not even sure like it's on anything, really. Alex also says he loves the Fish Out of Water Field of Part 2. Yeah, and like I said, like that's inspired another countless amount of cop films. That whole Stranger in a Strange Land kind of thing. I'm sure that French Connection 2 was not the first film to really do that, but it's the first one like cop film like that I can really like. It was made in '75 that I can note where somebody's just kind of dropped off in a place like that and they don't really know what's going on or the language or anything. Yeah, X-Ray says I like French Connection too. It's not as strong as the original, of course, but I don't hate it either. I just it's a very odd movie. Almost impossible like to follow that movie up though, really. James says that in real life the French smuggler was a war hero from World War II, so the French government sort of protected him. I didn't know that, but I could totally see that. And wasn't there something to people that are really into this movie might know about like the mafia connection and the French connection? Like ended up being one of the major like crime families in New York, like Sonny Grazza or something like that had something to do with it. Let's see. He says, "Yeah, I saw it. Sika, you saw it and didn't like it very much. In Marcel, creepy somewhat. Yeah, that's true. Rampage is streaming on Amazon Prime. I did not know that. I will definitely check that out then. It's really bizarre. Nighthawks started out as French Connection 3, and it was going to team up Popeye with Richard Pryor as his partner. Jesus. Oh my God. What a interesting movie that would have been. Richard Pryor and Gene Hackman, I guess. Nighthawks is a great movie, by the way. Could do a whole show on Nighthawks, and probably would be a bad idea. But I don't know like how that would fit in. But um, for those people that haven't seen Nighthawks, it's one of those movies where Rutger Hauer like gives an amazing performance. He's given like at least five or six like just stellar performances, and freaking Stallone is probably like one of his best roles too. And the ending of that movie, that's like one of the best cop movie endings of all time, really. Jake says he's not gonna lie. He always avoided the French Connection too because I think the ending of the first film is perfect, and I don't want it sullied. Yeah, I mean, for those people out there that maybe haven't looked at a lot of these freaking movies, um, you will notice certain constant things in all of like his bigger movies. And there's like an ambiguity to the characters, and there's usually kind of a cynical ending where he things don't work out very well, or he things don't work out the way that you thought they were going to work out. And that's probably like one of the cooler parts about watching all these movies is because you watch all the horse shit that comes out now, and I'm not one of these people that is defending modern movies. I'm one of these people that has the mindset of if it's a modern film made in Hollywood today, then I'm going to assume it's shit until like somebody proves me otherwise. So I know there's a lot of people, and we talk to them on the show sometimes where they're just so cheery and wanting to say how great you know everything is nowadays, and how they've made all these advancements in these films, and I just don't really see it that way. Like I think that the scope of like what they make in Hollywood now, and even a lot of the independent movies now, is just fucking trash. So that's why I've enjoyed going back and watching a lot of these freaking movies, because they're actually movies, God forbid, that make you think, and they're actually movies that usually have some sort of interesting dilemma from the characters, and they have to solve something, and there's a good ending to it where it doesn't give away everything, and they don't tell you everything that's going to happen, and or that did happen. So I don't know. But French Connection 2 wasn't directed by Friedkin, so don't have to worry about that. It did, however, make $12.5 million at the box office on a budget of $4 million, and so it was a hit. Wasn't as nearly as big as a hit as the first one. It got good reviews. It didn't get nearly as good reviews as the first one, so it's just kind of one of those movies that's gotten lost in time. That was just completely eclipsed by, same as like The Exorcist 2, except The Exorcist 2 was goddamn horrible. But you know what I mean? Like, nobody ever talks about The Exorcist 2 unless they're making fun of it. It just gets eclipsed. I tell you another great example of a movie like that too, where nobody even really ever references it, is Jaws 2. Because those Jaws sequels, honestly, unless you're like looking at them as laughably bad, to where like, you know, people make fun of them and say they're so bad that they're good, nobody ever talks about those movies because the first movie was so groundbreaking and so phenomenal that like those movies just look like shit up next to it. Especially the second one. The second one, we've been through this because on the Jaws shows, but they are not, they do not hold a candle to the first one. So Frankenheimer lived in France around this time, and that's one of the reasons why he agreed to make this film. And it's actually filmed in France. And he says that he made it partially because he wanted a film that would be watched by audiences. I guess he'd had a couple of like box office bombs at that point, and he wanted like a name, you know, something that was already known, an entity that was already known to kind of like revive his career. And so this was that movie. I don't know like how much of that it really did, but it was a hit, I guess. And it was very well received by the critics, at least. I don't think anybody really remembers it. It's long too, man. That's another thing about this movie. Like the first one, I think was maybe an hour and a half, a little over an hour and a half. This movie's like 2 hours long, and shit, like it feels like it too. Some of the sequences like draw on forever. But okay, that's what I've got on the French Connection movies. So now what we're gonna do, we're just gonna talk about cop and drama, or cop drama movies, and from the 70s and 80s. That's what we're going to do now. Because fuck it, man. You know? It's 11 o'clock on a Saturday. So, give me some ideas for, you know, some movies to talk about, like cop-related films that are some of the better ones, some of the worst ones. And we'll just start going through them. Somebody brought up Nighthawks, which that's one that I hadn't thought of in a long time. It's a classic. So X-Ray says, I got to check out Busting with Elliot Gould and Robert Blake. It's another grim and gritty cop flick. It's a majorly slept on, and the camera work is like a decade ahead of its time. All right, that's a good one. I will try it. This week is Cop with James Wood, and it has similar ending to 10 to Midnight with Bronson. We mentioned 10 to Midnight 2 weeks ago. Okay. Yes, James. There is, especially with the movies. There's something very special about the movies and the music from the 70s. I think it was because they really let the filmmakers really explore what you could do. They kind of let them, like they were the stars at that time in the 70s. Like a lot of these filmmakers, especially in the late 70s, you know, the Coppolas and the Friedkins and the George Lucas and Spielberg, they became like those big stars. And, you know, their movies became like signature kind of movies. And the studios just let them kind of do what they wanted, which you don't ever really see that anymore. Unless it's those same guys. I mean, you still see that with Spielberg and shit, but, you know, see it with anybody else. Rush. Oh my God, I haven't seen that movie in quite a while. That is a good. That's one to revisit. Do people remember Rush, where the undercover cops? I think they don't they get addicted to heroin or some sort of. I think it's heroin, and they end up like just the whole hell of like going through that. And I think it's Jennifer Jason Lee and somebody. Phantasmat. I feel like the Taking and Pelham 1, 2, 3 could have been a freaking film. I love the hell out of that one. Cop movie, sort of. That is. I haven't seen that movie in a long ass time either. They make a sequel to that movie, or a remake. If that, oh God, is that the remake with Denzel Washington? There was a remake of that movie. Taking a right beneath that, Taking a Pelham is a classic. I feel like Walter Matthau's character should have had spin-off movie. Several people are saying I should check out Silent Partner with Elliot Gould and Christopher Plummer from '78. It's a crime thriller that's intensely violent. Well, that's nice. Okay. I'm trying to think of some here, like those kind of movies, you know. Heroin, coke, and meth. They get addicted to in Rush. Okay. Blair Hathaway says Cop and a Half. That's a fucking classic. Who's it? Burt Reynolds. What about while we're on that subject? What about Chuck Norris and the dog? I can't remember what that one's called. That's a rad movie. Oh God! Now see, I would 100% do this. How about the Dirty Harry flicks? The first two are classics, and the third gets on. Yes, the first Dirty Harry is. I'm not sure when that movie came out. Did it come out before French Connection or after? It was pretty close whenever it came out. But those movies, all the way up into like the mid '80s, were great. And I think that a huge part of the first Dirty Harry movie being great was shit. I can't think of his name. The guy that was in Hellraiser, Andrew Robinson or Robertson or something like that. I mean, he played that role pitch perfect. Like, there's so many scenes in that movie, especially the scene where he gets his own ass kicked. Andrew Robinson, yeah, okay. So, you know, I can't repeat the line nowadays, but there's a line in that movie where the way that he delivers it is just amazing. Where he's like, you know, I want you to just beat the shit out of me. I paid for it. And so he gets his own ass kicked to make it look like that Callahan, you know, is the one that did it so he could frame him. And just, you know, him on the school bus with the kids and, such a good movie. Magnum Force. Yeah. Jake, I don't know. I like those two movies about equally as well. I love the idea of like this corrupt sort of cop group. And there's that classic scene where they're, you know, in the parking garage and they're all like surrounded him. All these cops, these dirty cops, and he's talking to them. That's a great movie too. Hell, even Sudden Impact's good. The only one I don't really like, come to think of it, is shit. What's the one? The Deadpool. I don't really like the Deadpool. And so we got Relentless from 1989. I haven't seen that one. There's a ton of 70s Italian cop flicks. Name the starring Maurizio Mali. Dirty Harry is borderline exploitation. Yes, it is. Speaking of Walter Matthau, Charlie Vernick is another badass 70s crime film. It also has Andrew Robinson from Dirty Harry. Oh, there you go. Magnum Force was a response to the liberal critics who hated the first movie. I could totally see that, yeah. What you doing, baby? Did I ever tell you where it says that I tried to watch French Connection years ago and fell asleep on it? I mean, I could see that, yeah. It's kind of like a product of its time, really. It's not, I don't know. It's not like newer action movies, I guess. Let's see. The Boys Next Door. I've never heard of that one. I don't know which one I prefer, Jake, but I can tell you this. I prefer the music in the original Dirty Harry. That is some of the best music. Like that whole thing with the, I don't know how to explain it, but it's just like the voices and stuff like that. Oh, all that shit. Something about that where they're up on the rooftops and he's chasing him around, trying to figure out where he is, and that music's playing, and like it's kind of gives you chill bumps just thinking about it. Here we go. Top Dog, K9 Cop with John Belushi was also decent. Turner and Hooch, man. That's like the quintessential. The Tom Hanks one. I can't believe how. If you think about it, isn't it amazing how many silly ass like subgenres of films there have been? Like there was a time period when you know there was orangutan movies that were really popular. There was cops with dogs movies that were really popular. There were cops with kids movies that were really popular. It's like, how does this shit even like catch on? A Simple Plan is a great crime film. It is. The Coen brothers, I think. Now, when you get it, oh Jesus fucking Christ! How did I forget about that? Um, 48 Hours, like that's one of my favorite all time movies. Which, speaking of shit, you could never ever get away with today, like that. The whole thing with Nick Nolte in that movie being like as racist as he is, like there's no way. But that movie is as that movie's like the '80s French Connection. It's as close to like that style of movie as you could really get. Like it's so kind of just gritty and dark. Red Heat. Yeah. Red Heat. I love the idea of Arnold being a Soviet. Another 48 Hours is an underrated film. Yes, it is. The guy, I cannot remember the guy who plays the head villain in that movie, but he's great. He's in the first movie, too. Um, it's such a good ending to that movie in the club and all that, too. Christ almighty. Domestic Disturbance. I don't know why, but I watched that movie not too long ago. Hey, Alexander, how you doing, man? And I mean, it's a okay movie. It's just it's a bizarre kind of like Vince Vaughn performance in that movie. Best cop movie might be Loaded Weapon One. I actually saw that in the theater, Matt, and loved that movie. That was around the time period when like parody movies came back, and The Naked Gun brought all that shit back. You know, first there was Airplane, and then like the '90s version of that was The Naked Gun. I loved all those movies. We've got to talk about Manhunter. I'll be honest with you, I've never seen Manhunter all the way through. I tried to watch Manhunter, and I know this is sacrilege, but I just I could the part of it that threw me. Maybe I did see it all. Yeah, we know. Wait a minute, that's not true. Me and CK watched it all the way through one time, and I swear to God, one of us fell asleep. I think I can't remember which one of us it was, but because he got that movie right around the time it came out on DVD, and we tried to watch it, and I'm not positive if we made it all the way through it. I just remember being bored. Shit, call a series of shows on Michael Mann Manhunter. Yeah. Man says, well, watch it again, God damn it. I mean, I might. Yeah, it's a slow burn, to say the least. There's so many good ones, though. I mean, crime films, and, you know, Above the Law. That's fucking classic. Steven Seagal. Anybody seen Richie? Yeah. Um, Steven Seagal. It's an actual fucking cop movie too. Isn't that sad? Pat Garrett is the lead. Listen, that's fucking. CK says they couldn't get past Pat Garrett as the lead. That's the dude that was the lead in To Live and Die in L.A. You can't fucking talk shit about him. You know a movie, a cop movie, that with horror sci-fi elements that's totally fucking underrated is The Hidden. Actually, The Hidden too. Either one of those movies. I love those movies. I will champion those movies. That is a great example of just like an underground movie that's got great chemistry from the two leads. Great cop movie. I feel like Rambo should be on this part of the show. Like Rambo Raff, not the actual like John Rambo. Um, to talk about a lot of these movies too. Jake says, I recently watched Deep Cover. It's a great crime movie, probably Jeff Goldblum's best role. Have not seen that one. Yes, Jake, it does actually have a sequel. There's a DVD that had both versions, or both the first and the second one on it. Phantasmat, Scanner Cop 1 and 2 are highly enjoyable. Got that one right back here somewhere. Oh, God. Matt, see, if this wasn't a show about horror films, and there wasn't 50 other people that do this the same kind of thing, like in terms of like action films, I would do a whole show over some of these fucking movies. Cobra is just like, just mwah. It's stupid. It has cult elements in it. It's got like what they thought was going to be like the next Rambo, kind of franchise. So there's like tons of really kind of shitty dialogue and like catchphrases and stuff. And it's just a great movie. It's a great 80s movie. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure. Like Stallone made a lot of really great movies that, you know, are not from the big franchises, Over the Top, Cobra, Nighthawks, um, Lock Up, Tango and Cash. Tango and Cash was like Tango and Cash was like the height of stupid like buddy cop movies. Like if this is a great kind of connection, but if the French Connection was like what a real partner like cop partner movie looked like, then Tango and Cash was as far away from that as you could possibly fucking get. But I saw that movie in the theater too and thought it was immensely entertaining. Still think it's immensely entertaining. It's fucking silly, but all those movies from the 80s like that were silly. X-Ray Punch says Cobra feels like an Italian cop flick, but with Hollywood money. Forget about characters and story. It's more about the style and the ambiance. And that is very true. I just like the scene where, for no particular reason, he comes in before he cleans his gun, and he like there's a piece of pizza, and he takes a pair of scissors and cuts like the tip of the pizza off and eats it, and that's all he eats. And then like why was that scene? I guess to show like he's eccentric. I don't know. Oh shit, Matt. Most memorable scene when he cuts the pizza. Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even see that before. But that literally is like one of the most memorable scenes in that fucking movie. Because it's so just bizarre. It's just like out of place in the rest of the movie. He had a great gun in that film, though, too. With the Cobra unshot. Let's see. Daylight, he says, is an underrated Stallone movie. Danielle Harris is in that, too. You know what else is an underrated fucking movie, bulls? I don't know if it's that underrated now, but I loved this movie when I was growing up. And still think it's an underrated movie. A Bruce Willis movie. The Last Boy Scout. Man, yeah, that movie is like mainstream and Hollywood, but it's got some like dark shit in it. Like it has some really kind of like dark and bizarre stuff that happens in that movie. And I love his character in that movie. Like I think that's one of his best performances, except for McClane. You know, is the last. And it's also got Daniel Harris in it. It's weird. Oh yeah, yeah. Last Boy Scout was huge then. I just don't. You don't ever hear anybody reference it anymore. Matt, uh, I just bought In the Heat of the Night on 4K from Kino. Yeah, I think it is supposed to be. But I've never seen that movie. But one more second on the Last Boy Scout though. I love the fucking catchphrase where he's like, touch me again and I'll kill you. And he kills that weird. The lead villain in that movie, aside from like the guy that I'm pretty sure was supposed to be the Cowboys owner, like a imitation of the Cowboys owner. The lead villain Milo, I think is his name, which is just really weird, kind of, you know, I don't even know how to explain him. Kind of like, I guess they were going for Gary Busey's character in Lethal Weapon, like kind of offbeat villain. That's, man, that's a good movie though. Dramatic Stallone in Copland. I've actually seen Copland. Eh, whatever. I mean, it's just not my. It's not my thing. We need to do a commentary for No Holds Barred. That's a classic. We really do. Vice Squad? Are you talking about like Wings Hauser's Vice Squad? That's another subgenre of movies that's odd, by the way, that got popular. Not, not that that has anything to do with this question, but it just reminded me of the squad thing in it. It's like ski movies. There was a time period in the '80s where just any comedy about skiing was immensely popular. Oh yeah, well I mean, Vice Squad fucking murders it. I'm trying to think of some other cop movies. Well, I'll tell you another one too that fits in that weird category of like cop horror films is The First Power with Lou Diamond Phillips. Um, Watched the hell out of that movie when I was a kid. Still think it's a good movie. Very reminiscent of like Shocker, something like that. But yeah, The First Power is a classic. Snowboard Academy. I'm telling you though, man, you could probably name off 10 different like ski, you know, snowboarding style movies from the '80s, and probably most of them would have sequels too. Can't forget Samurai Cop, Mister Fujiyama or whatever the hell your name is. That movie's fucking. You want to watch something with a bunch of people and just get drunk? Watch Samurai Cop. Like that is one of the funniest goddamn movies. Like unintentionally. And that's the thing that makes a great movie like that too. Like I've said a million times, like they tried to make that guy that was making that movie, the director of that movie was trying to make a real movie. But it is one of the worst like mishaps in all ways. Like dialogue, uh camera work, uh continuity, just god damn that movie's great though. Okay, man. There you go. Silent Rage with Chuck Norris. That's a great movie. Yeah, where he's fighting like the genetically engineered unstoppable guy. Like he's made in a lab or something. I can't remember what it is, but like something about him. And yeah, Cruising is technically a cop movie. Cruising has a lot of lube. There's a lot of lube in Cruising. A lot more than probably any other cop movie. So yeah, I'm gonna wait around and see if anybody, because this is some great like, if nothing else, like I've seen a lot of these movies, but it's really like bringing back some nostalgia too, though. Let's see what some people throw out here. because I love like certain types of like 80s cop movies that are great. I mean, the 70s was the start of all that shit, but the 80s, they had a formula down and they were just churning out these awful movies that were, I mean, they're great, but they're awful. 10 to Midnight is one I have not seen yet that I'm going to have to see. Because I don't know how many people have recommended this movie. Which, as you know, if you want to talk about Death Wish, the first four Death Wish movies I love. And, you know, I think Slippy was one of the ones that was talking about like Death Wish. The third one, um, there's one of them. It's either the second or the third one that's absolutely fucking amazing. It's a really solid movie to be like a sequel that's, you know, to kind of like a throwaway sequel like that. Where the guy's running all the gangs and, you know, he's got his head shaved and like to paint it and shit. At the end, he gets taken out by a bazooka. The first Death Wish was the first Death Wish was kind of like to me like the French Connection. Like it felt real and gritty, and you know, yeah, it felt like something that was really going on, and it wasn't like out there and silly or anything. Like it was all plausible, like what went on in that movie. Um, and then as they go along, it's just he turns into fucking Rambo, and he's just you know shooting people with a automatic 44 and or whatever. Like he's got the strongest handgun ever, and it just starts doing that shit. So yeah, the lead bad guy in Death Wish 3 does look like Bill Burr. That's the guy that gets blown up with a bazooka. It's a great line. You believe in Jesus? Well, you're gonna meet him. Mm-hmm. But you know, there was so much stuff. I'm trying to think of anything else. Um, yeah, Matt brings up a good point. The assault scenes in part one and two are actually like very real. And fucking Jeff Goldblum's in the first one. I'm pretty sure he's like one of the rapists or whatever in the first one. And those scenes are just still this day hard to watch. Yeah, I think stylistically, Assault on Precinct 13 is like you can't get much better than that. Just for the style, the way that Carpenter made the film and the widescreen and the one you know central character who's constantly like he doesn't say anything useful through the whole movie. His whole dialogue is just like one liners and quips and shit. It's amazing. Murphy's Law is an awesome slasher action Bronson flick. You know, Bronson's a weird one that got you know really popular. There's a story about Bronson, but I can't remember who told it. I think it was Bronson. Or maybe it wasn't. Anyway, I'll come back to that. Demolition Man is a cop flick that predicted everything that's happened in the last 20 years. Yeah. What an underrated movie that is, too, still really to this day. I mean, that movie was a big blockbuster when it fucking came out. And, you know, it just because of Stallone, really. But it was a really, really fucking good movie, too. And Sandra Bullock's in it. I think the only problem I have with that movie is like some of the side characters kind of suck, like Rob Schneider and Dennis Leary. It's like, what the fuck is Dennis Leary like living underneath the subway system? Like, that's just They were they just threw people in that were kind of popular at the time that really didn't fit into those roles. But the main part of the movie with Stallone and Wesley Snipes was amazing. It's also like one of the first films that referenced Taco Bell, I think. Stone Cold, yeah, man. I mean, CK and I have been talking about Stone Cold for 20 years now. That movie, especially Lance Henderson in that movie, and oh shit, William Forsythe. I mean, that's probably what made that movie. I mean, it's goofy and whatever and over the top, but the two main villains are fucking amazing, like Henderson and Forsythe. Like that's what makes that movie to me. If they hadn't had those two guys, and most of that stuff, from what I understand, was improvised. That the dialogue in that movie. So if they hadn't had those guys just playing those roles, yeah, that would not have worked out. When am I making the shirt? I see red people. I don't know. Hopefully soon. This is one that Rambo talks about all the time. Rambo Raff. Predator 2, which was a huge bomb, I think, when it came out. It got shit on by all the critics. And as like time has gone by, I think it's gotten like a new life. People have kind of gone back and reevaluated it, and for the most part, I really, really enjoy that movie now too. Um, just a it, People didn't like it because it was so different from the original. They took the concept of Predator and brought it to like a city, and a lot of people felt like that Predator should have been like a jungle style movie. I think that was the biggest part of it, and that Schwarzenegger's not in it, and it's a cop film really with Danny Glover. It's a good movie though. It's not a bad movie. Now, Gary Busey is way the fuck over the top in that movie, but I think he's that way in every movie. In Sin of Murder, you met Henderson. I'd love to know what he said about Brian Bosworth. Stone Cold was before its time in regards to white supremacists trying to take state capitals. Yeah, that's true. Stone Cold was a great one, man. There's one with I don't know if a lot of people remember this one. I'm pretty sure he's a cop in it though. Jeff Speakman, and it's called oh shit. I never thought I would forget this movie. Oh, the fucking movie with Speakman with the big fucking Tanaka guy from Running Man. Perfect Weapon. Yes. It's a good movie, man. Like nobody, going to hear a lot of people talking about Perfect Weapon anymore. And I think that was supposed to like launch his career, a la like Van Damme and Seagal, and it didn't. But that's still a kick-ass movie. And the action scenes in that movie are some of the best I've ever seen filmed. Like the way that they do them, just a really, really good kind of kick-ass movie. I don't know if that's a keto he's doing. I'm not sure what it was, but he was indeed the perfect weapon for that time period. I'm gonna wait around and see if anybody throws anything else out. Stone Cold is similar to Beyond the Law, but just less serious about the topic. Hard Boiled, I have, and I have watched it. I just have never been a huge fan of those Asian cop films. Like people shit themselves over those movies, man. I get it. Like I get the draw. I just never got into them. Trying to think if I can come up with any myself. Hmm. I mean, okay. I think if you really want to like dig deep into the catacombs of like cop movies from the 80s and 90s, I think that China O'Brien was a cop film. I think she was a cop in that movie. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Cynthia Rothrock was a cop in that movie. Um, and listen, that is a great fucking movie. As is that other one that Garrett was talking about. And I cannot think of the name of it, but it's the one that's got Corey Haim in it too. A great fucking movie as well. They just they don't make. First of all, there's no real big like you know female action stars that are like karate. It's all UFC shit now, which I hate. I mean, I don't hate UFC. I just hate putting that shit in films. Like that being the thing. Like if you notice, the majority of times they've tried to do that, it does not work. Like those, you don't remember anything about those characters. Um, Blue Steel with Jamie Lee Curtis. It's a great movie. I haven't seen that in forever. Um, X-Ray says Blue Steel feels like a true Halloween 3. Lori moved to New York, became a cop, and ran into another psycho, but this time with a gun instead of a knife. There's Ron Silver too, I think. Time Cop. Fuck. Fucking A. Time Cop. Just the thought of Ron Silver reminded me of one of the greatest cop films of all time. Time Cop. One of the dumbest, most incoherent time travel movies ever with Van Damme. Um, but man, that's a good movie. Showdown in Little Tokyo. I've still got the DVD of that somewhere with Dolph Lundgren and Brandon Lee. Man, I love that movie. It's kind of shitty, but I still love it. I even love. I think Dolph Lundgren's Punisher is like vastly underrated film. You know, they did the Thomas Jane one, which fucking sucked, and then they did the John Bernthal one now, and it's like it's fine. I really do think that Lundgren's that movie in particular was really really good. Um, Nobody ever talked except maybe Rambo like references that movie. Um, but what a good movie! It's basically the Punisher taking on the Yakuza, and Showdown in Little Tokyo is basically the same thing. Just he has a partner, and it's a little bit more lighthearted. Now, as far as like Dolph Lundgren movies go, my all time favorite is I Come in Peace. They call it Dark Angel or some shit. No, it's I Come in Peace. That makes sense because he says that throughout the movie. It's a great. I'm not even being like. I'm not. This is not ironic. I'm not even kidding. I'm not trying to be cute. I Come in Peace is a great movie. The idea of that movie is really underrated. Which the idea of it is this alien comes down and he tries to like trick people into thinking he's peaceful So he only knows like a couple of human phrases, but one of them is "I come in peace," and like he says it as he's trying to like kill everybody around him. So it kind of like throws people off guard, and it's amazing. I don't like Brian Ben as the fucking partner. I never liked that guy. He had that series on HBO, Dream On. It's just ugh, ugh. X-Ray says, "Look, buddy, wait a minute, Wes. Thomas James Punisher is just not good, bro. It ain't nary count. 80s Punishers felt like almost like a Frank Miller story. Yep. James Caan and Alien Nation. I have not seen that movie in forever too. That's a great little movie with the guy that's like deeble double. Axel Foley says I Come in Peace is a great movie. Hell yeah, it is. Cinemurdrum's right there saying it's awesome. It is awesome. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. There is a lot of great action movies out there. I think Die Hard with a Vengeance, X-Ray is probably my. I'll put it to you this way: I grew up watching that movie. Um, it came out when I was probably like middle school, high school. So like it's got a special place in my heart. Maybe even more so than like the original Die Hard. The Ray Stevenson Punisher Warzone was crazy. Yeah, that's one that nobody ever references anymore either. Um, the Ray Stevenson Punisher Warzone movie. That movie was just too fucking like violent and just dark and depressing. People just did not enjoy it at the time, but I think it's kind of gotten a second look too. Yeah, Sicko. Dark Angel is what they call it. They even call it that now on the Scream Factory release, but it's to me it's not called Dark Angel because that doesn't make any real fucking sense. It's just called I Come in Peace. So yeah, Matt, we're just basically talking like action films. I'm trying to waste some time here, and just like 70s and 80s. Some of your favorite action films, rad films. Because you want to get radical with all things that you do. Because all the little radishes out there, they just appreciate it, man. Let me see if I can think of any more. Come on, man. Come on, brain. There's a million more. There's a million dudes that tried to be action stars too during that time period. Cop related films, mostly in that genre. Matt? Yeah, these are two great ones. Two of my favorite action films are from the late 90s. The Replacement Killers, which is a really good movie, and The Long Kiss Goodnight, which is ultimately a very flawed movie, and I think that they thought that that movie would be like a franchise too. I love it. I'm just saying, like, it's just something about it is unfinished or something. I don't know how to explain it. But it was a great film. Gina Davis, La Femme Nikita kind of movie. Copycat's another one from around that time period. Never gets referenced anymore whatsoever. It's a serial killer cop kind of movie with Sigourney Weaver, and oddly enough, Harry Connick Jr., who gives a great performance in that movie. I stand by that movie. I think it's one of my favorite, like, little known films from I guess it's the 90s, probably the early 90s. Matt says, has anyone mentioned Band of the Hand for its totally rad 80s action? Band of the Hand? I've never heard of that. Uh-oh, Bulls. We've got a breaking news segment here. Reports are coming out that Synapse is releasing 4Ks of Just Before Dawn and Street Trash soon. Well, I will be probably buying both those. Axel says, what action movie around Die Hard time had tons of car explosions on a racetrack? Is this like a quiz, or do you really want to know the answer? Yeah, he plays like a perverted Southern character really, really well. He's like, I'll tell you what you want to know if you give me a pair of your squirrel covers. Matt, well, you always enjoyed the Death Wish movies? Yeah, me too. A bunch of explosions around a car. Was it? No, it wouldn't have been that. You know what, Axel Foley? I can't believe we haven't even thought to bring up Beverly Hills Cop, considering the first two at least. God damn, those were some. I like the second one as much as I do the first one, to be honest. Um, Something about the vibe of that movie. It's more comedic too. The second one is more overly comedic. Hmm. Michael Mann's Heat, one of the all-time great shootouts. Yeah, I saw that movie. Oh, long. That's like a 3 hour long movie. Um, Probably when I was a teenager. So this great scenes with Pacino, De Niro. Like it was. Now somebody had said, I don't know if this is true or not. I've heard this. It's one of those things where you just hear somebody say it and you automatically assume it's probably true. It may not be. That scene was filmed like they weren't ever together in that scene. So there's a classic scene in Heat where they're sitting at the diner table or whatever, and they're talking to each other, and he's like, "Oh, if I have to put you down, yada yada, yeah, whatever." And I'd heard somebody say that scene, like they were like filmed completely apart, like they just filmed Pacino's scene, and they're never together in that scene. Which, if that's true, that's a real fucking bummer. Michael Pare was a great underrated sci-fi action star. I remember that fucker. I remember the name. I cannot remember what he was in. Was he the one in American Ninja? Or was that somebody else? Eddie and the Cruisers. Michael Dudikoff was the guy in American Ninja. Shit. Yeah. What about Michael Dudikoff? Anybody have any thoughts about his career? Oh shit, I gotta get the fuck off here. So if we go over 2 hours, like something happens, like I think elves come out and they fucking kill us or something like that. So I'm at 2 hours right now. Anyway, I appreciate all of the comments and the questions and the dialogue and shit and things like that. Unfortunately, we don't have the resources to afford to go over 2 hours on this show, so I'm going to have to head the fuck off here. But join us next Saturday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time when CK and I will be closing out Weekend at Friedkin's with the weirdest goddamn combination of films ever put together to review, The Exorcist and Blue Chips. So that is next week, and in between that, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of shit that I can't remember that's going to happen. So check us out over at Dead Pit on Patreon, Dead Pit on YouTube, Dead Pit on Instagram, Dead Pit on yada yada yada. And I'm Uncle Rad. Peace out. I've got to find this real quick. I was not prepared.
Give us the thumbs up.
Up your butt.
Like, subscribe. And if you subscribe, here's something else you can do. Once you subscribe, you can click the bell notification, right? And it'll notify you anytime that Dead Pit puts up new shit.
Or don't. I really don't give a if you do or
I
don't.
want you to. I want you to.
I don't care.
Let's keep our community growing here on YouTube.
I don't like it. I don't want you to do nothing.
Listen, they need to do that, pal.
No, don't you dare touch it.
Thumbs up. Subscribe. And click that bell.
For this video officially, it's Old Curly Jaws has a message for you. Go on over to shop.deadpit.com and go look at their Teen Public store right now. You got some new shirts like the Old Curly Jaws official t-shirt, which is brutal and badass. You got the Yummy Gummy shirt with the captain himself on the shirt. You got Uncle Bill's face on a fucking shirt. You got the Final Girl shirt. You got all these shirts over at shop.deadpit.com. Get them before they're all out, especially the new one, Bedtime's in 39. It doesn't get better than that, so go on out. Check out these shirts at shop.deadpit.com. Go look at their Teen Public store. You're going to have a good old time. Get them all!
Thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon. DeadPitOnPatreon.com is the only place to check out a complete archive of the old Dead Pit radio shows all the way back from 2005 on, in addition to the midweek shows and fan commentaries, exclusive podcasts, and much more. Dead Pit on Patreon.com if you're interested. Tiers start at only $1.